Hope your night was better than mine. Yep, that's really what it comes down to. Hope your night is better than mine because Tom Telesco is a friend. The LA Chargers are my team, and the Chargers were an embarrassment last night, and my friend and his head coach lost his job last night. But I think that you can see the seeds of doubt within the players planted not just in their play. I mean, because, look, it wasn't – last night was the culmination of what has been going on for essentially a year, really, right? Some bizarre play calls, obviously. He was a go-for-it guy his first year. Wasn't as much a go-for-it guy in his second year. But they did make the playoffs in year two. They're up big, and, of course, they lose in the playoffs despite the fact they're up, what was it, 29-0 to the 27-0, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. You never really recover from that one. That one's really, really hard. We're watching the Bills try and work through the fact that they didn't recover from 13 seconds 2 years ago. But to me, the biggest issue is something that I've been accused of. Okay? I've been accused of, and others have as well. And it can sound like a compliment at the time. And people try and let you down kind of softly when they say, man, you're the smartest coach we got. He's smart. They use the word smart is not always, and maybe mostly, not a compliment. You're like, how's that possible? Because Brandon Staley at times tried to be the smartest guy in the room. And if you do it in front of the media, there's a strong likelihood you do it in front of the players. Here's Brandon Staley after the game last night when he was asked if he'll be the head coach today.
Do you expect to be the coach here tomorrow?
I don't know that.
Do you think you should be?
Yes.
Why?
I know that what I've done here for 3 years, and I know what I put into this, and I know that we're capable of going. I know the type of coach that I am. I believe in myself. But again, this isn't about me. This is about a group that's hurting in there. We got to get some rest, and we got to get ready for Buffalo.
Got to get some rest. Got to get ready for Buffalo. Right? Got to get some rest. Got to get ready for Buffalo. There's a group that's hurting in there. So, look, he obviously had to know it was bad. Richard Sherman called for him to be fired at halftime. But when you're trying to explain things, and this is something that you learn in life, right? When you try and explain things when there's anger and you try and outsmart the room, you just get exposed and people just go, you're just trying to be smarter than everybody. And I truly believe that's what undid him. And maybe that's why the defense was so lost, was his game plans or his strategy was too advanced, too much on a whiteboard, and not in terms of realistic, and the players couldn't understand it, and there was mass miscommunication. Here's Brandon Staley when asked if there's a player disconnect.
You say nothing went right tonight. All due respect, last 3 weeks the offense has somewhat been stagnant. You pulled out a win in New England, but with 2 field goals. Do you personally feel there's a disconnect between yourself and the locker room, the players?
I don't.
Yeah, well, the proof is in the pudding. And one of the things, and Jay Stu, I will commend you on this one. I'll commend you. You called for his firing last year. That would be the Belichick model, right? Which is better a year too early than a year too late. And so instead now the Chargers go into an offseason. They'll have a new general manager who will inherit Justin Herbert, but will also inherit his new contract. A massive cap bill. And he'll get to hire his own head coach. Right? But all of these players now, it comes into question what the new general manager thinks of these players. Because new general manager, new management, you've had a guy for 11 years pick this team, and they got pretty good personnel. But you hire 4 coaches, and this is the way it ends, and the last one ended poorly as well. And I think we know where it's going.
And by the way, Doug, my whole thing about firing him after the 27-0 was we knew how important this year was. If there was a year to go all in and just hire just a great head coach or the best head coach, this was the year because This is the last year of Justin Herbert's rookie deal. There's a lot of money on the books for that defense. They're going to have to trim a whole lot of payroll. This team is going to look so much different after this year. Like, a new head coach at the beginning of the year would have had a chance to make a run with a full roster with Justin Herbert's deal, and it just didn't work.
It did not work. You are correct. So I guess here's the question, right? Do the Chargers do what the Chargers have always done, which is hire somebody relatively inexpensive? There's Ben Johnson, who's the outstanding offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, right? Hire an offensive guy, protect Justin Herbert. Or do you hire Bill Belichick? And he's got Josh McDaniels as an offensive coordinator, and, maybe he brings Brian Flores in, who's probably a candidate to be the head coaching job, as his defensive coordinator. Now, the downside to that for Belichick is what he'd be asked to do. I'm sure they'd hire a GM that he would have a good relationship with. Is this team is going to have to, as you point out, slash some of this payroll with some of the veteran players, get them to take new deals, but also you're going to have to win in off the waiver wire and in the draft room, which has not been the strength of Bill Belichick. I was just a weird night. It was the easiest pick of all time to pick the Raiders last night, but if you would tell me the Raiders, who are a 3-point favorite, would have 63 points, I would have told you you're out of your mind.
They had the over with 5 minutes left in the second quarter. The Raiders themselves had the over, which was, I think it was 34.5 or something like that.
Buyer, did you watch it all? Even a moment.
Yes, I did. Yes, and actually, I stayed with it to see how many points the Raiders were going to score.
Right. It was one of those, man, this is a dumpster fire. This is that you rubbernecked. That's what you did last night.
Yeah.
Right? You're driving by. You're like, I'm just going to drive by here. And you're like, oh, my gosh, look at that car. What is that? How did it get on its side? What are they, Dukes of Hazzard? Right. That's what it felt like last night. Lots of people rubbernecking with I don't really care about this game. I go, what's the score? Oh, I got to see how bad this thing gets. And I think there was at least with Richard Sherman saying you should fire him at halftime. I thought there was maybe he doesn't come out, or maybe he gets fired right after the game. That was nuts. How long did you watch, Jay Stu?
No, I watched. I guess the first 3 quarters, but the thing about what you're just saying is, if it was just a 9-2 game,
which was your prediction,
and two teams just being bad. Mm-hmm. People would have tuned out, but there were 2 things going. Dan's angle of how many points are they going to score, and it was really interesting to see just how apathetic the Chargers were being. They were getting their butts handed to them, and they didn't look like they cared, and then the constant shots to Staley and that stupid look on his face. It turned into an intriguing watch for those reasons.
Well, I do think the post-mortem, and when we find out exactly why there was such a disconnect, is going to be really interesting, right? Because they just wouldn't play for him. But part of it was, the defense was so bad for much of this year. I mean, just awful, giving up more 20 or more yard plays than anybody in the NFL. It was just atrocious. And then, Staley's like, I call the defense, so it's on me. You're like, okay. And they got worse, not better. Now, they were fine against New England, but New England has no offense. But that was an amazing, really car crash that everybody, that you, Dan Byer, rubbernecked. Go ahead.
Yeah. And, Doug, I know, again, your relationship with Tom Telesco, but the fact of the Chargers, honestly, I think the only thing right now appealing about them is Justin Herbert.
They have a very good left tackle, right? You have a good. No, I'm serious. You have of the
listen
two.
To what you're saying, though. Listen to what you're saying. That's the problem. They whiffed on J.C. Jackson. Quentin Johnston hasn't been good. Mike Williams is always hurt. Joey Bosa is always hurt. Khalil Mack flashed, at times here and there. You're right. They have a left tackle and they have Justin Herbert. They can't run the ball. Austin Eckler didn't want to be there. So this This team is not just a insert head coach and they win right away. And I think that's also to the point of what Jason was saying, and maybe it was already too late about how important this year was, because now you can't count on this core and what they were for another 2 or 3 years. So the turnaround may be quicker because you have Herbert, but I just don't think that there is tons there for anybody to be like, yeah, I really want this, aside from Herbert and Rashawn Slater. Like, I think that there is a lot that you got to change on this team. Derwin James, always hurt. You know, I mean, it's...
Yep. Derwin James always hurt. I mean, Tuli Palatu.
He's been amazing, by the way. He's been amazing. I like him.
He's outstanding, right? So you have, really, you're going to build around Tuli, I guess around Derwin James because he's under contract. Bosa, if he's ever healthy. Slater. And you do have the quarterback. And the one thing, and you're right? It's a clunky roster. It's a clunky roster with a lot of age in some spots. Let's also remember, again, if we're all going to be fair, you lost Corey Lindsley for the year. That's your starting center. You lost Donna Parham's hurt. They're always bitten by injury, but you lose your center, albeit he's in his mid-30s, so you should expect that. You're not going to be that good. But you do have the most... actually probably 3 of the most important positions in the NFL covered. Right? You got a great weak side linebacker. You have a great left tackle and a very talented young quarterback. And then you have as good a safety as there is in the NFL, albeit you're right, he's hurt a lot. So I think that there's going to be a mass turnover? Of course. But would you rather be them or the Bears? Would you rather be them or the Patriots? Real question. Would you rather be them or the Patriots, Dan Byer?
I'd rather be the Chargers, but the Bears question is a lot more difficult than you think.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have that, right? Because they have 2 high first-round picks, likely the number 1 overall pick from Carolina. Okay, but they have a couple of decent offensive linemen. But, I mean, compare and contrast.
Their defense has been good, borderline, really good over the last month or so. So they have turned things around in Chicago. It's just the point with the Chargers, though, is I think we look at they've got a lot of shiny pieces and big names.
Yeah.
And Austin Eckler, I think, is the perfect example of it, and maybe it's my fantasy football background coming into play here, but man, Eckler catching passes, running the football. Well, he can't run the football. The wide receiver story is the same. Keenan Allen ends up being the only one that's healthy, and even he ends up getting hurt at times. He didn't play last night. And so all of these pieces, the offensive line, you're right on paper, great. Rashawn Slater, Corey Lindsley. I think any team would take those 2 guys across the NFL. It's just, maybe it's not fair to Slater because he's still young in his career, but, Lindsley's been hurt and those guys haven't been on the field at the same time. When I look at them and I see them, I just see Herbert, and that is the most appealing stuff. And then whoever comes in there is going to have to figure out a way to make everything work around him because a lot of these pieces aren't going to be there in the next, year to 2 to 3.
It's crazy. Okay, so I guess the question becomes, do you hire a GM who is, a draft specialist who's going to scrap it and start over? Or do you go after Bill Belichick? Now, the argument for Belichick would be this, okay, that, when Belichick's had a quarterback, obviously he was very, very good. And he's the opposite of what you've had previously, right? You've had 2 completely unproven guys who've barely been, 2 coaches ago, you had a guy who, barely called plays in the NFL. Brandon Staley was only in the NFL for 6-7 years before he became a defensive coordinator, then all of a sudden was propelled to being a head coach. You got a guy who's got 20-plus years of success in the NFL, and Josh McDaniels is available. What appeals to you? If you were running a team, what would appeal to you?
I don't think Bill Belichick is right for the Chargers. I think that he would be great and would be be able to be hired anywhere. I don't think that's what they need. I know it's taking a risk to kind of go in a Staley-esque direction that way, but I think that's I do think that they need to build through the draft and build that foundation. It's a quick turnaround. You can turn things around quickly in the NFL. We've seen that, so it's not like such a daunting task. And I feel like a Belichick coming in there would just try to be maybe I don't know if a Band-Aid's the right. Can't believe I'm even saying don't take Bill Belichick, but I think I am.
I would take Bill Belichick in a heartbeat. And, again, if I was making the sale, I would say, we'll take you. We'll give you whatever you want. You got to bring Brian Flores as your DC and Josh McDaniels as your OC. And then eventually when you retire, Brian Flores gets the job.
That's what
I would do.
That sounds expensive, right? I mean, and that the track record of this ownership group is not to spend.
You're right, but I will tell you, okay, and this is a real thing. You look at all their star players; they've all been handsomely compensated at the top of the market. They're moving to Los Angeles next year. It's all about the franchise value, and look, where has hiring on the cheap gotten them?
Exactly.
So, anything good is going to cost you. You could go young and inexperienced, but man, you really are rolling the dice. I get it. You're probably rolling the dice however you do it, but you're definitely rolling the dice in a major, major way if you hire an unproven head coach, an inexperienced head coach, especially considering they've hired so many inexperienced head coaches in the past. That's a real thing.